Hello fellow cinephiles, 90s Film Guru here, welcome back. For those who are new to the channel, my name is Sean, also known as the 90s Film Guru, and I've started this channel, revamped it should I say, to do everything related to the 90s, especially movies and TV shows. So thanks for joining me. Today I'll be reviewing The Phantom. This came out in 1996 and was directed by Australian director Simon Windsor, and obviously was based on a very popular comic at the time and also still very popular now and very collectible. It stars Billy Zane, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Kristy Swanson, Treat Williams and a variety of others. It made for $45 million but only went on to make $23.7 million. So it wasn't really that well received. And a lot of audiences today would kind of look at it as a kind of silly, cheesy sort of film that came out of the 90s. And to be truthful, it sort of is a bit like that. But there's something really nostalgic and great about it. You know, this and The Shadow for me were movies that I grew up with, that I've watched numerous times, and that I sort of have a great love and respect for. And even though this has a lot of cheesiness in the dialogue, the acting and everything, it sort of feels like it was a film that was made back in the 40s or 50s, you know, and it has that nostalgic feel, the look, the silliness, the over-the-topness. And yet again, this is another one of those superhero movies that was using a lot of the silly, gimmicky, over-the-top humour that was used a lot in the 90s in these particular types of films because it was considered as sort of a joke and as sort of a silly film. But this sort of is still really great. All the stuff on the island with the Phantom's really great, the history of the Phantom. There are choices and decisions made in the film that are sort of different to the comics, where he sort of interacts with his father who's dead, you know, that sort of ghost aspect. And they move away from the island and go into the city, and I kind of like that because it feels like him in a different environment. He's not the Phantom when he goes there, he's Kip, and I kind of like the aspect of that. The script itself is based on three Phantom comics: Sang Brotherhood, Guy Bandit and The Belt. And you can see how how those sort of storylines and stories are weaved into this film. I think Billy Zane's really great at this. This is definitely one of his better roles, and it's definitely at the height of where Billy Zane was very popular, where he still had hair, where he was doing Titanic and movies like that. And I think he was really, really good in this as the Phantom. He physically fits the role, he has a lot of humour that he brings to it, and you believe him to be this sort of hero, even if he is a little cheesy and a little out of his own depth, especially when he's in the city. His performance is really, really good and sort of makes this film very fun. You need a very strong actor and a strong lead to play a character like the Phantom. It came out was years after, when it was still very popular, and you needed an actor to really portray that in a good way, and I think he does a solid job with that. Comics and this film should be really redone. I'd love to see a new version of it. Yes, they did another version of it. It was a mini-series set in present day. It just didn't work. I kind of want them to make another version of this film set here at this time period that this film's set in. But I guess as there's multiple Phantoms throughout the years who take on the mantle of being the Phantom, the ghost that walks, it'd kind of be interesting if you saw it through the years and then we set on present day with the most current Phantom. I thought that could be really interesting as well. But it is definitely something that needs to be re-looked at, in my opinion. I think Catherine Zeta-Jones is really good in it. She's sort of one of her early roles where she plays a female pilot and she's the captain of these other female pilots. And I like her introduction to the film when we first meet her. It kind of, when we do first meet her, it kind of feels a little bit like what they did in The Mummy years later. And I kind of like that, and I like her performance in it, and she's kind of tough and cool and interesting, and I think she really suits the role and she does a great job. I think Kristy Swanson's really good as well. An actress that, when she gets the right role, she really shines, and this is definitely one of them. This and Buffy, I think, are both her great performances. I think she's really good here. She's sort of a character that, you know, is tough and strong, but gets herself mixed up in something, and Phantom has to come and help her, and it's kind of a great relationship between the two, and the way that Swanson and Zane bounce off each other is really good and adds a lot of humour and romance to the film. She plays Diane Palmer, who's sort of a rich girl but gets swept up in this adventure, but I kind of like that. It makes you really feel connected to the character, and it's kind of a fun experience for her and us as an audience to watch the antics and things she gets involved in. There's a lot I like about the film besides the acting. I like the set design that feels like the 30s. I like just the way certain things look. I like the costumes. I like the sort of dialogue that would be from that era, from the 30s, which is really cool. I mentioned comic book movies that came out in the 90s were very campy and silly, and this is that. Like, I'm not going to deny it's not a bit goofy at times, but it's just a pure entertainment of it. Do I think it's as good as The Shadow? Not quite, but I still really enjoy it. I think a lot of stuff that they used in this film would be later used in The Mummy. Just sort of certain interactions of characters where they find themselves and the journey that they go on is kind of similar in little ways. And I like that. I think the late great Treat Williams is really good as the villain in this. He plays it really well. It's very over the top and goofy, but that's kind of what they're going for, and I think he does a great job of it. Even though critics were divided with this film, audiences seemed to really like it at the time. It's still around, but I feel like it's been forgotten a little bit. I think The Phantom is something that there are a lot of fans of, especially older people. And I think if you did a new version of it, they would get so much out of it before their generation passes away. And I kind of would like to see that. There are a lot of practical aspects to the film. There are a little bit of visual effects, and some of the visual effects look a bit dated and silly, but it's just the practicality of it, like the beginning of it where they're driving in a truck and what happens with them there, that feels like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. When they get to the city and then they find this hidden alcove, this hidden cave with these sort of the Sang Brotherhood and how that unfolds. And I'm pretty sure that that set was used in a number of films, including Phantom of the Opera, the one they did in the, I think it's the early 2000s. It just feels very stagey. All of it feels stagey, but I like that because it represents that period of time when filmmakers used to make films like this, and I love that. I like the Phantom Cave that we get to see, the way it's set up, the way it looks. And I think in a lot of ways the Phantom comics, when they came out, it's mostly set on the island that he grows up on, which is kind of interesting, but at least with this film we got to get off that island. We got to see another aspect, another place in the world that inhabits the Phantom universe, and I kind of like that. I just felt that was kind of refreshing, and we get to see him in a different jungle. He's out of his jungle into the concrete jungle, and I thought that was really cool and a great contrast between the two. It's very similar to the Batcave, which that's something I really like, and it sort of gives you that superhero nostalgic feel. I like the third act and the ending. I like the suspense that happens. There's a lot of things that unfold. I like the performances within these sequences, and I like there's a mystery and a history to it. There is a little bit silliness in regards to three skulls coming together and a ring, and it just feels a bit too much like Spaceballs with the fight with the two rings. I thought it was silly. That lets it down a little bit. I know what they were going for this sort of supernatural, mythical sort of aspect to it. It just didn't quite work for me, but it was still okay for what it was. Like I mentioned, it's very similar to The Shadow. They came out at similar times. They were both directed by Australian directors, and there's sort of a feel and look about them that are similar. I guess you could look at it like Batman and Superman. So The Shadow is more like Batman. It's darker and grittier, and a lot more creepier things unfold in that film. And The Phantom's like Superman. You know, like he's a much lighter character. There's a mythology about him. And he always is just trying to do the right thing no matter what. And that's the best way to describe those two films, but they are similar in many aspects. There's just something about those two films that go hand in hand for me. Swanson's character, Diane Palmer, is very strong and is very independent, and she'll do what she has to do. And even though the Phantom has to help her, it isn't like he has to rescue her all the time. She is capable of taking care of herself. And I kind of like that, which you didn't quite get to see in a lot of these 90s films in regards to the more superhero aspects where the female is a really strong character. But this is something that Kristy Swanson did a lot in her career, you know, especially with Buffy. I think Buffy has a great arc, the movie I mean, not the series. I like her arc in that, and I think she's definitely the best character of the film, and I like what she does in that movie. And this character sort of feels similar. In the end, this is a very entertaining movie. It mightn't be for everyone. If you don't like really cheesy and goofy films, you might enjoy this. But like I said, there's a real nostalgic feel about this. That's why I love it so much. It takes me back to that time period when I was much younger. And I would go to the cinema and see all these movies. We only had one cinema where I grew up. And it was this tiny, tiny cinema. And obviously later on we got a bigger, much bigger cinema with multiple cinemas within it. But it's just something about watching these movies and thinking about that time when I was younger and going to these movies in such a small cinema, and it was the highlight. Movies have always been that thing I've really loved and enjoyed all the way through my life. They weren't something that I was told to like or had to like. It was something that I found my own way into, and it's continued on throughout my whole life. But I just really like being transported back to the 90s, hence why I began this channel in the first place. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Letterboxd and Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.